This is the story of Alitalia Flight 771. On the 7th of July 1962, Flight 771 was flying from Kingsford Smith Airport in Sydney to Rome's Fiumicino Airport. Since this was the 1960s, it had a bunch of stops in between. It had stops in Darwin, Australia, mueang, Bangkok, Bombay, India, Karachi, Pakistan, and Tehran in Iran. It was late in the day on the 7th of July. The plane was currently approaching Bombay, India. The plane was in touch with Bombay Center. They were currently at 36,000 feet, and they expected to be on the ground at Bombay by 6:45 p.m. GMT or 12:15 a.m. local time. As they passed the city of Aurangabad at 6:26 p.m. GMT or 11:56 p.m. local time, they were in contact with Bombay Approach. They were descending down to 20,000 feet. The crew said, leaving flight level 350 down to 200 Bombay at 45. ATC gave them the details for the airport, including the QNH values. The crew expressed their interest to land on runway 27. As the plane approached the airport, they got down to 5,000 feet on its way to their assigned altitude of 4,000 feet. ATC wanted to know if Flight 771 would be making a straight-in approach or if they wanted to do a 360-degree orbit. ATC asked, 771 request your intentions. Are you coming straight in from the outer marker for landing runway 27 or making a 360 over the outer marker, then reporting leaving outer marker inbound? Over. Alitalia 771 was cleared to do a 360 over the outer marker. They now had to let ATC know when they were done with the 360 and when they were heading back towards the airport. ATC confirmed what they had just discussed. Roger, understand you will be making a 360 over the outer marker. Report leaving outer marker while proceeding, making a 360. Alitalia Flight 771 replied with Roger, will do. Alitalia Flight 771. This was the last time that they heard from the airplane. After ATC did not hear back from the airplane, a search and rescue mission was started. They found the wreck of the plane on a hill called Diavandachi near the airport. None of the 94 occupants made it. The crash site told investigators quite a bit. The plane was on a heading of 240 when it struck the mountain, and it was in level flight. The first officer's altimeter was recovered, and it showed the correct altitude that the plane was at. In addition to all of that, all of the plane was at the crash site. All major parts were accounted for. The investigators talked to the flight dispatcher at Bangkok. The flight dispatcher prepared an operational flight plan or a company flight plan. Now, he says that he handed this flight plan over to the pilot in command, but the pilot in command had not signed for the document to show his acceptance. As per Alitalia rules, this was compulsory. So with no signature, we have no way of knowing if the pilots actually had the flight plan prepared by the flight dispatcher. The flight plan was not recovered from the wreck. The chief pilot of Alitalia admitted that a lot of pilots did not consider the company flight plan to be absolutely essential. Sure, they were supposed to have it on board, but a lot of pilots did not. In addition, the flight dispatcher told investigators that he accompanied the pilot in command to the meteorological office for a weather briefing. But the Deputy Director General of the Meteorological Department had a different story. He said that there was never a weather briefing because no one showed up. Not the dispatcher, not the pilots. The flight dispatcher, after creating the company flight plan, that is the one that was meant for the pilots, created an official flight plan. This was the flight plan that was sent to ATC. Both flight plans had a small error. The flight plans called for 35,000 feet after reaching the city of Nagpur, but it was supposed to be 36,000. A small mistake, nothing too significant, but the company flight plan and the official flight plan differed in one key way. The official flight plan, that is the one given to ATC, needed the pilots to fly straight and level for 7 minutes after passing the city of Aurangabad and then descend for 13 minutes, whereas the company flight plan, that is the one that was meant for the pilots, asked the pilots to fly straight and level for 3 minutes after Aurangabad and then descend for 17 minutes. But looking back at the flight, the pilots requested a descent when they were at the city of Aurangabad. This did not confirm to either of the two flight plans. This reinforced the hypothesis that the pilots did not have a flight plan on board. But unfortunately, the investigators were not able to prove that beyond the shadow of a doubt, as the plane was not equipped with a cockpit voice recorder. Poor planning and the lack of a briefing would have contributed to a higher than normal workload in the cockpit at the top of the descent. There were also allegations that there were not enough navigational aids. The complaints said that the navigational beacons were placed too far away from where the planes actually were, and this made it hard for pilots to accurately plot their position. But when talking to pilots who flew the route, they said that they had no issue with the beacons, so the beacons were not to blame. Another allegation was that ATC asked the plane to descend too soon. As the plane approached Bombay from Aurangabad, it had to fly over a mountain range called the Western Ghats. The highest point in this sector was a mountain peak at 5,400 feet, 13 nautical miles north of the Bombay Aurangabad Airway. Looking at the records, they found that ATC had cleared the plane to descend when the plane was well outside of its control area. But this was accepted and established procedure for jet aircraft flying this route. The ATC's clearance were valid and they were not to blame. Honestly, for this crash, the air traffic controllers came under a lot of scrutiny. Their skills were called into question, and it was found that their training and skills were above average. It was contested that ATC was at fault for clearing the plane down to an unsafe altitude, but again, a court inquiry found that ATC was not at fault. With ATC ruled out, that left the pilots. The pilots started their descent at 6:24 p.m. and 36 seconds UTC when they reached the city of Aurangabad. In 14 minutes, they had reached 5,000 feet. But after reaching 5,000 feet, the pilot kept on descending all the way down to 3,600 feet. This was in violation of the clearance that they had received, which cleared them to 4,000 feet, and in violation of Alitalia's minimum safe altitude for the region, which was 9,000 feet. Buried in the transmissions from the pilot was a clue. The pilot said, 771 is leaving now 5,360 on the outer marker. This told the investigators that the pilot thought that they were near the outer marker when they were not. Remember, he had started the descent early and they were nowhere near the outer marker. In the end, the pilot thought that the plane was closer to the airport than it actually was. The 360-degree orbit that the pilot did took the plane right into a mountain. There was also a lot of discussion over the responsibility of terrain avoidance. Some people felt that it was the ATC's job to keep planes clear of the terrain, while others thought that it was the sole responsibility of the pilot. Some pilots had an assumption that an ATC clearance all over the world would take terrain into account, and apparently back in the day, in some places, that was not the case. So assuming that your clearance had safety margins for terrain factored into it was dangerous. According to the ICAO Annex 6, Chapter 4, it was up to the airline to figure out minimum safe altitudes for all the routes that they flew on. Am I the only one who feels like flying during the 1960s involved a lot of guesswork? I mean, today you can expect ATC to guide you pretty well and warn you of terrain and other obstacles. But if this account is to be believed, ATC's main job back in the day was to vector you and make sure that you did not fly into another plane. If you flew in the 1960s, let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Thank you for watching this episode of Mini Air Crash Investigation. If you like the videos that I make, do consider liking and subscribing. It will really help the channel grow. I'll catch you guys next time. Stay safe.